Was the music original?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. Sorry for being slightly late in getting this Zoom call started. I had to run and find the microphone because heresy never sounds so good as when it's amplified. Okay. I'll bring up the roll sheet and proceed to try to recognize the present people. Some of you are physically present. Hopefully, most of you are mentally present, but we won't ask too closely on that.
Do you get credit for us if we watch it on YouTube?
Yes,
Well,
as a matter of fact.
I'll see it. I watched them on YouTube.
You know, I was actually thinking yesterday or so about time to go through that again. We got so many new people.
Okay, Charmaine Adamson is here. Rex, Teresa Aldrich, Salemu Alimasi, Kenva Barr, Amber Bernhardt, Mark Cabrera, Donna Carter, gotcha, she'll probably notify me later by email. Bob and Lana Creel are here. Michelle Flores. Zeke Flores.
Here. Present.
Audrey Grizzle. Veronica Juarez. Alex London. Annette Miner. Camille Morales.
Yeah.
Rhonda Newbolt.
Here physically and hopefully mentally.
Emmanuel Ogedengbi. Karen Sanders.
Here.
V and Ruth Shelburne. Austin Tidwell. Maria Trevino. Connie Williams. And Reginald Wyatt.
Hi, Brother
Okay, I'm
David.
wondering,
This
I
is
see some of you on
Kendra.
here that I have not. Yeah, I see that several of you are you not, I'm not hearing you. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Can you hear
Okay,
us?
Canva has indicated that she is here. Camille is
And
here.
Donna
Karen
Carter is
Sanders is here. Let me,
Donna Carter is here.
thank you for pointing that out.
David, can
Okay, I
you
see
hear
Donna
us?
Carter, B. Shelburne. But I'm not hearing anybody. Can you guys hear me? If you can't, if I can't hear you, you might type something on the meeting chat. Let me know if I'm coming through.
Hi, Brother David. This is
See
Kendra
Rhonda
Barr. I
Newbolt.
just didn't know if you knew. I didn't know we were supposed to say present or here. I just thought you were just reading off what you saw us logged in or something. I'm sorry.
Chatting. No, it says they're all Xed out as far as hearing. They're all speaking, yeah, they're all got an X by their name.
David, Mom and Dad are here.
There's Zeke Flores. I'm not sure why this is not coming in. I'm not hearing you. I hope it's not something on my end, but okay, you're all answering me. Unfortunately, I am not hearing it, and I'm not sure why. my volume.
Does it have anything to do with the red X by their name up there?
Okay, I just changed over on my speakers. Try answering me again. I'll see if I can hear you.
Hi, Brother David.
Hi, David.
No?
Dad, granddad and granny are here.
Yeah, it does.
Hi, David.
But some of them are not muted and I'm still not hearing them. But you, okay, but you can hear me, correct? Is that correct?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, you know, from the fact that you said we answered you, I probably could have figured that out. I'm slow, but I get there eventually. Well, I don't have a ready answer at this point as to why I'm not hearing you audibly. We may have to work that out, but I did get the seeing problem fixed last time. You couldn't see me, and you don't get that lucky credit this time. Too bad. Okay, well, I'm gonna go on because I really don't know how to fix that at present. We'll just have to make the best of it. Okay. For starters, I should mention that I thought that we were about a week behind. And so I studied ahead and I was going to do Jephthah, one of our judges, the discourtesy of giving him about a 5-minute review and going on to Samson. Because like I said, I thought we were behind. Turns out we're not behind. Which means that's probably the first time in history that a Shelburne teaching a Bible course could make that claim. Just saying.
You got a response from me up there, so you gotta be arguing with.
But I can't hear him, so it's not a problem. This is pretty handy. It reminds me of the person who said, I got a universal remote, and my greatest disappointment was discovered that a universal remote does not in fact control the universe. It is unfortunate. Okay, we're going to share screen. This is the outline of the book of Judges, just by way of review. We mentioned in the beginning that there was a double introduction to the book of Judges. The first introduction basically catalogs Israel's military failure. They were told to go in and clean house, which meant mass murder, if you will. Only it's okay when God says do it, right? We think. And the second introduction deals with Israel's religious and moral failure, which was a consequence of the first one, because they hang out with Canaanites and they got Canaanized. It happens. Bad company corrupts good character, I believe the old saying goes. And the Canaanites were seriously bad company. And then there is a description of the spiral to destruction that would form the main body of the book, how they went from being seduced into idolatry to God sending punishment in the form of a foreign invader, to them crying out in distress, to God raising up a deliverer, to the deliverance happening, and then the land had rest and they would have peace. And then when times got good, they would go right back into idolatry and the cycle would repeat itself. We then mentioned that the main body of the book covers 6 major cycles of Judges. They're not all the same length. The first one was really short because the judge was too good. Nothing bad to say about him. So as you can see, it just took, 5 verses. In the book of Judges, the less they say about you, the better. Cycle number 2 was Ehud, whose enemy was the Moabites. That took a little bit longer, but again, very short, 12 through 30, verses chapter 3, 12 through 30. And then there are a few minor judges sprinkled in with that all we basically have is their name and 1 or 2 facts. And they come like this. The first time a minor judge is mentioned, there's one of them. The next time a minor judge is mentioned, there are two of them. And the last time a minor judge is mentioned, there are three of them. Very orderly. So the first judge was named Shamgar. The major cycle number 3 was Deborah and Barak, whose enemy was the Canaanites. And she was the one of, in this story, Jael put a tent peg through the temple, not the house of God, through the physical temple of the enemy general, whose name was Sisera. The second group of minor judges were Tola and Jair. They are mentioned in chapter 10, verses 1 through 5, which is kind of where we're starting tonight. Major cycle number 5, the judge is Jephthah. We're going to try to get through him tonight. He was the one that was going to get skipped, but he got lucky. He's been reinstated. Even though I spent all day studying the next guy. Dang it. 3 minor judges follow him. And then the 6th cycle is the story of Samson, who is, of course, famous from every Sunday school on earth. Then, just as we had a double introduction, the book ends with a double conclusion, which I have entitled Reaching the Bottom, because believe me, we've been going downhill, but we find the floor. We find the bottom in the 2 stories that finish out the book of Judges. And they are a desperately deplorable depiction of how bad things can get when we regard the wisdom of God as optional. So there you have it. All right. I'm going to stop share there because I need to change.
Sorry, just join the class.
Okay, I don't yet have what I need on here, so pardon me while I see you, Emmanuel. I know that I'm having trouble hearing you guys, but I will record you as present, God willing, and my memory working. Let me reopen my Bible text so I can get this up and sharing. Okay. There, hopefully that is coming up. It's coming up here. So I will assume that that's visible to you guys on Zoom as well. We will start chapter 10, verse 1. These are 2 minor judges. We say they're minor. That simply means we don't have a lot of story. We don't have a lot of text. For all I know, they were perfectly brilliant people, but we just don't have any information. They came, they went in a great big hurry in the text. So after Abimelech, you may, if you were here last time or saw this following, Abimelech's story was awful. It was bloody awful. And I mean both words in full. It was bloody awful. He was an extremely evil man. He's the kind of man that when the millstone landed on his head, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The earth was better for his absence. We're told, by the way, that the king who tried to kill baby Jesus, Herod the Great, when he died, there were parties and celebrations thrown too. So there are people like this who make the world glad when they shuffle off stage left. After Abimelech, there arose to save Israel Tola, the son of Puah, the son of Dodo. My goodness. Enough said. A man of Issachar, and he lived at Shamir in the hill country of Ephraim, and he judged Israel 23 years. Then he died and was buried at Shamir. He lived, he saved Israel, he died. Moving on. After him arose Jair the Gileadite, who judged Israel 22 years. So we got a 23-year guy and a 22-year guy. They did not have a presidential election every 4. Now, Jair, we have some slightly more information. He had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys And they had 30 cities called Havoth Jair to this day, which are in the land of Gilead. Let me make a couple of points here. All the judges that we have had so far in the book of Judges have been on the other side of the Jordan, what's called the Cisjordan, over by the Mediterranean Sea, where Jerusalem is, and Galilee and Judea and so forth. But this judge is actually across the Jordan in the country that belonged to the Amorites when Moses was coming in and they destroyed the two kings, Og, king of Bashan, and Sihon, king of the Amorites. So this judge is actually over on that side, on the east side of Jordan, the area that is called the Transjordan. Cis and trans had meaning long before the current sexuality debate. Trust me on that. Okay, he had 30 sons. There's a wordplay that goes on in the Hebrew that cannot be reproduced in the English. The word Jair is Yair. The word donkey is Ayir. Almost the same word. And the word for towns is Ir. So you have Yair, Ayir, and Ir, all coming together in the same description of this guy's life. So his name is Yair. He had 30 sons who rode on 30 Ayirs, and they had 30 ears, 30 cities. Little curiosity there. If you were Hebrew, you would have been chuckling long before now. And Jair died, and he was buried in Canaan. The other thing I would just note about this guy is God was not trying to establish a monarchy. You notice this? Their whole system of government was no executive branch, really, no legislative branch, because they already had the law, right? They did not need Congress. All they had was 2 levels of judicial branch. They had municipal court, they had courts in each town, and they had the Supreme Court, which was with the high priest. That pretty much it. No wonder taxes were so low. So it was not God's plan to develop this huge bureaucracy. And by the way, this comes out very clearly in 1 Samuel chapter 9, where they want the king and they want the monarchy and they want the bureaucracy. And God says, okay, let them have it, but let them know that they're going to have it, that they're going to take it. They're going to get busted in the chops. In the past, the oppression came from outside invaders, but they decided to domesticate their oppression. Now their king will oppress them. The kings, starting with Gideon, we begin to see the judges begin to act more and more like potentates, more and more like big, rich, bureaucratized people. And this is the pattern we see with Jair. He's got 30 sons who were in charge of 30 cities. And to have 30 sons, by the way, he had several wives. You couldn't do that if you were not really wealthy. This was Donald Trump living in Gilead, all right? And so you're seeing this magnanimous, becoming bigger and wealthier. You're seeing this pattern develop. Curiously, when he died, his sons apparently did not rule in Israel, because we move right along. All right, chapter 10, verse 6, Jephthah. The people of Israel, can you believe it, did evil again. Who would have thunk it? Pardon my disbelief. And they served the Baals and the Ashtaroth, and the gods of Syria, and the gods of Sidon, and the gods of Moab, and the gods of the Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. This is the most comprehensive list we have seen to date. They would hate to leave a god out or a country out. In fact, if you take a geographical map of all the places that they worship the gods from, you're starting with Canaan, which is right where they're living. They took over Canaan. The Baals and the Ashtaroth were what you might call domestic gods. They were the local yokels, right? But then they went to Syria, which is northeast. They went to Sidon, which is northwest. They went to Moab, which is southeast. They went to Ammon, which is east. They went to the Philistines, which is southwest. They were importing deities from every point on the compass. And on top of all of that, they didn't even give Yahweh a place alongside. They forsook the Lord and did not serve him. Notice the word is serve. They served the Baals. They served the gods of Syria. They served all these gods except the true God. Wow. So the big surprise is that God was angry. If your spouse was having 7 affairs at once and not sleeping with you at the same time, you might be just a little, what's a good polite word for it? There's not a polite word for it, is there? You'd be hot under the collar.
Upset.
And God was. His anger is kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and the hands of the Ammonites. And they crushed and oppressed the people of Israel that year. For 18 years, they oppressed all the people of Israel who were beyond the Jordan in the land of the Amorites, which is in Gilead. These two terms, which are used to describe the oppression, they crushed them and they oppressed them. I have a note about that somewhere. Let me look here. Yeah, these two words are basically what's called a hendiadys. They're not two different things. They're really a combination. They really crushed them. This is a doubling of the suffering. He's basically saying God is allowing stronger and stronger discipline to fall on his people who are, after all, I mean, this level of idolatry is the max. You can't get more idolatrous than this. This is serious. This is the spouse stepping out and basically going to bed with everybody in sight. And so for 18 years, God allows them to be really crushed. This is strong language. God has given them a whooping this time around. Verse 9. And the Ammonites crossed the Jordan to fight against Judah and against Benjamin and against the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was severely distressed. Ammon was over on the east side, right there by Gilead, right there by where Jair came from. But they weren't content to harass the Israelites just on that side of the river. They crossed over to the other side to raid and pillage and plunder and persecute the Israelites on the other side as well. Hence Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, which is kind of a way of saying the Israelites in general. Verse 10, and the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, saying, we have sinned against you because we have forsaken our God and served the Baals. I think this is the only place so far in the whole book that we have actually seen them make this admission. We've heard out that they cried in distress, but this is the first time they said, yeah, we did bad. We did wrong. We messed up. Had they been raised with Ebonics, they would have said, my bad. And they know the reason. We have forsaken our God and we have served the Baals. Okay, they admitted to 1 out of 7. And the Lord said to the people of Israel, notice we don't know how the Lord said this, but there's no prophet. Sometimes he would send a prophet. Sometimes he sends the angel of the Lord. Here we simply have God said. We're not told how he said. He might have thundered it from heaven for all we know. But the Lord said to them, did I not save you again and again and again? Did I not save you from the Egyptians, from the Amorites, from the Ammonites, who are the current problem, and from the Philistines, the Sidonians also, the Amalekites, the Maonites oppressed you. You cried out to me and I saved you out of their hands. He's listing some people here that have not featured in our stories, but we also have judges that we don't have the whole story for, right? So there were more episodes than we got in season 6 of the current miniseries. There was more stuff going on that we don't have the story behind, and God's summarizing here, and we just can see there are names here that we haven't figured into our part of the story that we know. But we understand the general idea. Verse 13, yet you have forsaken me and served other gods, therefore I will save you no more. Go and cry out to your huge pantheon of deities. You got 7 nations worth. Go talk to them. Let them save you in your time of distress. And the people of Israel said to the Lord, we have sinned. Do to us whatever seems good to you, only please deliver us this day. You're right. You're right. Do what you want, but please just get them off our backs right now. So, verse 16, mark this because you'll never see it again. They put away the foreign gods from among them, and they served the Lord, and he became impatient over the misery of Israel. Okay, this is a great word in Hebrew, and it's such a great word that we're not sure what it means. It says his spirit became short. He became short. Huh? How does God get short? Well, to answer that, you have to understand that Hebrew is a very concrete language. Abstract emotions are often expressed in Hebrew in a very concrete or physical form. So when it says in the scripture that the Lord is slow to anger, you know what it literally says? He is long-nosed. He is long-nosed. God has a great big old Roman nose, evidently. Now, why would he say long-nosed? Well, when you get angry, what happens to your face? You scrunch your nose up, don't you? And so the Israelites would say that a person who had an even temper, that didn't get mad easily, was long-nosed. If you had a fierce temper that was easily aroused, you were short-nosed. Okay? That's the idiom that's in play here. But how it is in play, we're not entirely sure. Some versions, like I think the NIV says, he could bear their misery no longer. It's possible that it means his compassion was aroused, but that is not necessarily what it means. The word literally means that he basically became angry. He got short. He got hot, but whether his hotness was compassion aroused to the point of deciding he had said, I'm not going to deliver them, but I just can't stand it anymore, so I'm going to deliver them. Or maybe it means the opposite. He's so frustrated, he wants to pound them into the dirt. It could mean either one. We're not sure. So this version, the English Standard Version is a very careful version. It leaves us with a word that allows that ambiguity to remain. He became impatient. What does this impatient means? We don't really know. Maybe we should read Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. So then the Ammonites, verse 17, were called to arms, and they encamped in Gilead. And the people of Israel came together, and they encamped at Mizpah. And the people, the leaders of Gilead, that's the people over on the Transjordan side, the east side, they said to one another, who is the man who will begin the fight against the Ammonites? See, they were afraid of the Ammonites. They had been beaten by the Ammonites for 18 straight years. If you're a high school football coach and you're about to play a team that has beaten you for 18 straight seasons, this was how it was. Who's going to be our guy? Who's going to change the course of things? At a later point, they would ask, who's going to fight that Goliath guy? Who's going to do this? Whoever it is, he shall be head over the inhabitants of Gilead. This story is going to be framed between two rash promises, and this is the first one. You should be careful what you promise. They made a rash promise because they were, well, desperate. It's going to come back to bite them on tender portions of their posterior. That's how we say it in Bible class. Chapter 11, verse 1. Now, here comes a new character on the scene. Jephthah the Gileadite, that means he belonged over on that other side, the Transjordan side. He was a mighty warrior, but, told you the posterior would enter into this, he was the son of a prostitute. Now, if you have grown up in today's America, you probably say, so what? Half the people in America are now illegitimate, right? Very close to half the people in America don't have parents who were married to each other at the time of their production. That's why you can go to places like Dallas and you'll see billboards that say, this literally was seen by somebody in Dallas. Billboard read, who's the father? Call 1-800-DNA type. Who's your daddy? A lot of people literally don't know. And so in today's culture, we don't have a lot of stigma or shame attached to the idea of being illegitimate. But go back not too long ago into yesteryear, leave it to Beaver, America, or further back yet, And believe me, it was a big deal for you to be illegitimate. It carried a lot of shame, and there was a lot of problem with that. It would be hung around your neck like an albatross, and they would never let you live it down. Think Scarlet Letter like that, right? Some of us in here might be old enough to remember a time when there was emotional freight attached to that situation. Well, in ancient Israel, which was still close enough to the law of Moses and to God, being illegitimate was a problem. And it was a problem you would carry the rest of your life. So here's the deal. Jephthah is what they need. He's good when it comes to war, but he's not socially acceptable. Verse 2. You know what? We're going to be behind before I get through with this class. Right where Shelburne ought to be. And Gilead's wife also bore him sons. Now, Gilead was the father of Jephthah, but he was the son of a prostitute. Gilead had stepped out to have that particular child. See what he's saying? Now, Gilead's wife, why she hung around, I don't know, but nonetheless, also bore him sons. And when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out, and they said to him, "You shall not have an inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." Jephthah was kicked to the curb by the real sons. He's just a stepson, and his mama was nobody they wanted around. Then Jephthah fled from his brothers, and he lived in the land of Tob, which ironically means good. He lived in the good land. Bad boy, good land. And worthless fellows collected around Jephthah and went out with him. The term worthless here is a term that we've seen before in this story. It is the word empty men. This is what C.S. Lewis described as men without chests. These are men, young men, who have no character and no values instilled in them. They're just tabula rasa. They're blank slates waiting around for entertainment or purpose. And somebody comes along and grabs them up and offers them an adventure, and away they go. Every generation has had people like that. We have more than enough people like that since we decided the family was no big deal. So we replaced the family with the welfare system, and now we have millions upon millions of empty men. That's just the fact. Empty men can become something, but at the point where they're young and empty, they are danger on wheels these days, courtesy of Bridgestone, looking for trouble. Well, David found men like this when he was out in the wilderness, didn't he? Empty men came to David. Remember who Abimelech hired in the last story? Empty men. Bad business. Verse 4, after a time, the Ammonites made war against Israel. And when the Ammonites made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to bring Jephthah from the land of Tob. And they said to Jephthah, "Come and be our leader, that we may fight against the Ammonites." Now you want me. Suddenly, I'm a hot item. Isn't it weird that you can have a boy that is raised in a community, and this boy is always a little bit weird and oddly turned, and then people discover that he's been persecuting small animals and killing cats. And they all kind of look at him like, trouble coming, you know. He's probably going to be a serial murderer one day. And then a war comes along, Vietnam comes along, and he gets drafted. And it turns out that his particular skill set worked real well in Vietnam. In fact, he comes back a special forces hero, medals from here down. And the very thing that got him the medals was perfectly okay over in the war zone, but now he comes back to polite society. And guess what? He's not a hero anymore. The things that made him shine over there can't be tolerated over here. And he, you know, that was the whole story, the whole dynamic behind First Blood, right? Rambo comes back and he can't fit in. Here's Jephthah going, I'm good at war, and now you have a war, and now you decide to tip your hat and acknowledge me. How nice. And they're saying, never mind the past, never mind that. We need you now. Verse 7, Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, did you not hate me and drive me out of my father's house? Why have you come to me now when you're in distress? Why should I give you the time of day? And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, that is why we have turned to you now, that you may go with us and fight against the Ammonites and be our head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. All right, there's a little play going on here, which is not as clear in the English as it probably was in the Hebrew. Back in verse 6, their first offer is come and be our leader. This is a word that might translate to be our general, be the commander of our war armies. And Jephthah says, why should I bother with you people, given the way you treated me? Well, when they repeat the offer, they change the word to the word head, rosh. This is a word we saw over and over in the Abimelech story. This is a higher title. This is not just the guy that's going to command the troops. This is, look, you can be the governor. They have basically upped the ante, very likely. And so when they realize that Jephthah's not real impressed and he looks like he's going to tell them no, then they decide to sweeten the offer. So Jephthah says, verse 9, to the elders of Gilead, if you bring me home again to fight against the Ammonites and the Lord gives them over to me, I will be your head. I'm going to take offer number 2. And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, the Lord will be witness between us. Funny they mention Yahweh at this point, right? He was like 8th in a row, 7 gods in front. The Lord will be witness between us if we do not do as you say. By the way, when you're making a deal with somebody that's really good at battle, you might want to keep your word. Just saying. Verse 11. So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and leader over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before the Lord at Mizpah. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, and he said, what do you have against me that you have come to me to fight against my land? And the king of the Ammonites answered the messengers of Jephthah, because Israel, on coming up from Egypt, took away my land from the Arnon, that's a river, to the Jabbok, that's another river. Reminds me of that poem Jabberwocky, but anyway, that's it. And to the Jordan. Now, therefore, restore it peaceably. Several generations ago, you Israelites under Moses, when you were coming in, took country that belonged to the Ammonites. Now give it back or we're going to have a problem. Now this was a lie. It wasn't even a white lie because these folks weren't Caucasian. This was an out and out lie, as Jephthah is about to demonstrate. He's going to give us a very long-winded demonstration of his erudition, of his ability to talk. Jephthah likes to speak. In fact, the word Jephthah means he opens. And what Jephthah does mostly is he opens his mouth. He's good fighting, but he's also good with using words. He's a wordsmith. I'm going to read through this, and if it doesn't all immediately seem real clear to you, that's okay, because you don't live here. And if you've seen the names they keep throwing around in the Ukraine war, you might be going, what? Some really weird names over there in villages, right? So this is a little strange to us, but it wouldn't be strange to these folks because they would know the places, they would understand the terms. So Jephthah replies, thus says Jephthah, verse 15 of chapter 11, Israel did not take away the land of Moab or the land of the Ammonites. But when they came up from Egypt, Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea and came to Kadesh. Then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, that was due south of Israel, below Judah, saying, please let us pass through your land. But the king of Edom would not listen. And they sent also to the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel remained at Kadesh. Now, if you're remembering that God said to the Canaanites, the Jebusites, the Hivites, remember what he said? Kill them all, right? But when it comes to Ammon and Moab and Edom, Israel is very, very polite. They ask permission to go through. And if the ites do not give permission, they don't go. Well, what's different about these people? How come Israel is so nice to these folks when they're exterminating everybody else? The answer is quite surprising. These people are the children of Abraham. God loves Abraham. God said, I will bless you and your children and your children's children. Edom was the people of Esau, the brother of Jacob. Ammon and Moab were the incestuous children of Lot and his two daughters. He was a nephew of Abraham. These people are related to the Israelites. And because they are children of Abraham, even though they're probably just as wicked as the Jebusites and the Perizzites and all the otherites, they're protected. It's as simple as that. Isn't that amazing? You can see this worked out in Deuteronomy chapters 1 and 2. Moses is speaking because they're still on that journey and they're coming up to the territory of Edom and Ammon and Moab. And Moses said to them, when you go into the land of Canaan, you kill everybody in sight and you take that land, it's your land. But when it comes to Edom and Ammon and Moab, I will not give you so much as the distance to put your foot. That land belongs to them and I gave it to them and you will not touch them. Isn't that amazing? Talk about the way God treats his friends. It's amazing. And that's the difference. All right, verse 18. Man, we're good. I'll be behind. I'll be really comfortable by the end of today. So he goes on and he says, so they journeyed around. They didn't go in because they hadn't got permission. And he proves through his argument here that the land that Ammon was claiming belonged to them back then actually belonged to Moab and the Amorites. So I'm going to summarize this because Jephthah's long-winded and so am I. But basically, he says that land never did belong to you. So what is your big issue? You have no case. If we took this to court, you would be laughed out of court. The judge would dismiss the case. For 300 years, you had an opportunity to complain that we took your land, and for 300 years, you never even brought it up because you know that you're just a lion. Therefore, verse 27, I have not sinned against you, and you do me wrong by making war on me. The Yahweh, the judge, may he decide this day between the people of Israel and the people of Ammon. So here we go, guys. Israel could not hurt Ammonites because they were the people of Abraham too, right? Unless Ammon does what? Attacks Israel. Now, if they attack Israel, all bets are off. The right of self-defense still exists. But, verse 28, the king of the Ammonites did not listen to the words of Jephthah. What a pity. It was such a beautiful speech. Verse 29, then the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jephthah. By the way, folks, in the Old Testament, the Spirit of God did not indwell people permanently the way that happens in the age of in the church age. The Spirit of the Lord would come upon people. He would, as it were, rest on them and stir their spirits and move and do things through them. But in the New Testament, we associate God's Spirit coming with a person being saved, and that's legitimate. That's what the New Testament teaches. But in the Old Testament, for the Spirit of God to land on somebody had nothing to do with their moral character. They could be sons of the devil, and God would still land on them with his Spirit and do great things. So don't make the mistake of assuming that just because it says the Spirit of the Lord came on somebody, that that person was a saint or an angel. We will quickly learn in the book of Judges that is not so. It just means that God used them. And if God could use Balaam's donkey, who is not in the category of saints, then he could use some people with some pretty strange moral characteristics. Now, I didn't say Jephthah was a bad guy. I'm just saying, let's not make that assumption just because the Spirit of the Lord happens to, if lightning struck you, does that mean you're Zeus's favorite? No, it might be random. So Jephthah made a vow. Did I mention rash promises yet tonight? The first rash promise was the people of Gilead in their distress saying, man, whoever can take out the Ammonites will be our leader. All right. You made the promise. Now Jephthah, who is going to be that leader, makes a promise of his own. And he makes a vow to the Lord, and he says, if you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace shall belong to the Lord, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. You know what Jephthah's trying to do here? He's trying to make sure that God will be with him. He didn't have to do this. God didn't say, unless you offer me a bribe, I will not help you in battle. In fact, God didn't say anything at all. Do you know that up to this point, every judge that's been raised was raised up in one fashion or another by God? In this story, there is not a single mention of God having anything to do with Jephthah being raised up. He was raised up by the desperate leaders of Gilead. Jephthah wants to be sure that God's going to help him. And so he makes this vow as a way of manipulating God's favor. Jacob, who was a manipulator par excellence, did the same thing. Remember, after God appeared to Jacob at Bethel in the dream, and God said, can you believe this? God said this to somebody who had just lied and cheated his whole family. A deceiver, manipulator. And God comes to him and says, I'm going to be with you and bless everything you do. Seriously? Yes. But Jacob knows he's a scoundrel. And so when Jacob wakes up from the dream, he's still afraid. He's still shaking because God's presence will do that to you. And what does Jacob do? First thing he does is, God, if you really will fulfill your promise, I will pay you a tithe. If you really will, then I'll give you money. What's he doing? He's being who he is. He's manipulating. I want to be sure you're going to follow through with that, God. This is what Jephthah's doing here. God didn't ask for it. He's doing it free gratis. Verse 32. So Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them over into his hand. And we're going to stop right there because it's time for a coffee/bathroom break. It is 6:20. We'll see you back at 6:25.
Well, into your hands. I think she said she invited this person, they didn't come, this person, they didn't come, this person.
Well, didn't she feel good being at the bottom of the list?
Well, these people wouldn't come, these people wouldn't come.
She could have just said.
Yeah,
"Would
she
y'all
could have
like
just
to
said
go?"
we wanted you to go with
We
us.
wanted you.
Yeah, that would have been better.
I just saw her that Johnny's gone.
Was she from?
She was from
Difference
Grand
maker? Oh,
Johnny's from there.
okay.
She lives here close, and she never did later years. In fact, I saw her twice. She's been in the nursing home over on Mount Teddy, the windmill. She would walk. Yeah, she would walk with her church. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she was just real close.
Huh.
Even if somebody was gonna come back and do that, she would be home, she'd walk.
Oh.
And she had dementia real bad. I go to see her and she's so glad I was there and everything, and she didn't know me. You know, she couldn't remember anything. I got a mom like that. No idea. That's
Oh, good. He's been pretty sick with probably another UTI, but she had her first steroid shot. Well, I'm not sure. The pain is, she feels down here, halfway between, but she's being told that the source of pain, what's causing it is up in the shoulder. So it's manifesting down here, but the problem's up there. She had the problem is they don't want to do surgery on somebody as old.
You know, when I broke this shoulder or the top of my humerus, this is what hurts terrible every time. That was where it hurt right there. And even though it was broken
Not
right
very
here,
humorous, is it?
it's not very humorous.
Not at all.
I'm telling you. We were in Washington DC and we were walking quickly to catch a bus. And you know, there's cobblestones and they're not cemented in, they're just in the ground. And one of them was up and we were going pretty quickly. I nearly pulled Rex down with it. And I just went.
You know, my arm, she went down and let go of my arm. And I was heading with my knee right for in the middle of her back. And so I just jumped as far to try to get over her.
Oh my
And I did.
goodness.
But
So you had to go to the hospital in Washington?
she didn't go. She wouldn't go.
Would you want to go to Washington, go to the doctor in Washington? I wouldn't, I don't want to. Now you would go because you.
Llama,
Yeah.
wrist and tore rotator cuff in Venice, Italy, and then go to the doctor, she's got back home.
That's what happened to me too. I just told Rex, I didn't tell Ashley because I knew she would throw a fit and say, you're going to the doctor. And
That night we went on a dinner cruise out on the Potomac River. And Charlie went like this.
well, I wasn't quite like that because nobody noticed.
Nobody noticed. There were people all over the sidewalks and, you know, going, just looking at the museums and the different buildings and stuff. Not one person stopped and asked us if they could help us. When we finally got her up and got her over on the bench over there, then there was just me and her. And one lady stopped and said, "Are you okay? We saw you fall. Are you okay?" And everybody else was down.
You know, people are afraid to tell.
I would say we're changeable, but that's not true.
I won't say they're not good people, but they just don't have.
Well, and they're afraid to get into somebody's business. They're just afraid of it.
My sister's first husband's mother-in-law lived with them because her first baby had liver problems. Rick was gone to Vietnam 2-3 times. And she was from Racine, Wisconsin. And she came down to live in Abilene. And she said, "I can't believe people
All right, folks, it's about that time.
stand in line without somebody talking to them, cashiers talking."
So we're going to pick up with chapter 11, verse 32, where the battle commences. So Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hand. You notice here the Lord does do his part. In spite of the fact he had said, "I will not deliver you anymore." His compassion got the better of him, I guess. And the Lord gave them into his hand. Not to mention Jephthah had a pretty good skill set anyway when it came to military endeavor. Verse 33, and he struck them from Aroer to the neighborhood of Minnith, 20 cities, and as far as Abel Keramim with a great blow. So the Ammonites were subdued before the people of Israel. Just like that. So often the battle is so short in the book of Judges and elsewhere. What's long is God's wrestling with his own people in preparation for the battle. And that is where the real battle is even today. Then, verse 34, Jephthah came to his home at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. As soon as he saw her, verse 35, he tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you have become the cause of great trouble to me. For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow. What was the vow?
That he was gonna, first person I see, yeah.
Or the first thing, or the first, whatever was the way it was actually rendered. And there is a dispute among scholars as to whether Jephthah even envisioned the possibility of that being a human being. The Hebrew is actually pretty vague, whatever. And you say, well, if it comes out of his house, we would assume that would be a person. But at this time, animals tended to live in a room that was considered a part of the house. So given that Jephthah does seem to be a God-honoring person, he seems to do business with Yahweh, and the whole idea of human sacrifice was anathema to the Jews back then as well as in the present. It would be most probable that Jephthah was thinking that one of his lambs or a donkey or a goat, something like that, and that he would simply let God randomly select what God wanted by causing that animal to come out. But no, his only daughter. This kind of harkens back to Genesis 22, doesn't it? God says, Abraham. Abraham says, here I am. And God says, I want you to take your son, your only son, the one that you love, and I want you to offer him as a burnt offering. That time, God actually initiated the situation. No rash vow, but the similarity is pretty clear here. She is his only child. This is no Jair with 30 sons who are riding 30 donkeys. This is one kid, daughter. And she makes her grand entrance at precisely the wrong moment. Now notice, and this is another reason that I like to use a version like the English Standard for study purposes. Many versions would not necessarily say, perhaps, I have opened my mouth to the Lord. That's not very smooth English. But do you remember that the word Jephthah actually means he opens the womb? It's what the word means. And the term he there, you typically substitute the name of whatever deity. It's a general purpose name, could be used by people in any one of these cultures. And you just insert the name of your God, whoever you give credit for fertility. Well, Jephthah has opened his mouth a lot. And is what he literally says here. He says to my daughter, I'm crushed. I'm wounded. And I'm in trouble now because I have opened my mouth to the Lord, which is his way of saying, I made a promise that I cannot break. And so in verse 36, she said to him, my father, you have opened your mouth to the Lord. She repeats basically the word Jephthah. You have opened your mouth. This is a remarkable, remarkable response from a young lady. If somebody told me I made a promise to God that involved the sacrifice of somebody that turned out to be you, I don't know that I would be this quiescent. This is, what a daughter. This is amazing. She says, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth. Third time we've heard this, right? I'm thinking right now that Jephthah was less thrilled with his verbal eloquence. Do now to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has avenged you on your enemies, the Ammonites. So she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Leave me alone 2 months, that I may go up and down on the mountains and weep for my virginity, I and my companions. It was considered at this time to be a great tragedy for a Hebrew woman to die childless. That was considered to be a terrible shame and reproach. Well, and by the way, it's become fairly fashionable for scholars to say probably something else was done to her, like she made a vow of celibacy and went to a convent somewhere. We would like to rescue Jephthah. We would like to rescue the story from this awful end. But the fact is, there is no good exegetical reason to doubt that an actual sacrifice and an actual killing is what happened here. So he sent her away for 2 months, and she departed, she and her companions, and she wept for her virginity on the mountains. And at the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow that he had made. She had never known a man, and it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went year by year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in the year. This is doubly tragic. Number one, because a rash vow brought a terrible end. But it's doubly tragic because it wasn't necessary for it to happen. If Jephthah had been less ignorant and more steeped in scriptures, he would have known that this did not have to occur, even if he made the vow. What am I talking about? A provision in the law of Moses, which we are going to take time to read, because guess what? We have time. Just a little bit. Leviticus 27. If little Jephthah had been paying attention, he would have used this out. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, if anyone makes a special vow to the Lord, like Jephthah, involving the valuation of persons, then the valuation of a male from 20 years old to 60 years old shall be 50 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. If the person is female, the valuation shall be 30 shekels. If the person is from 5 years old up to 20 years old, the valuation shall be for a male 20 shekels and for a female 10 shekels. If the person is from a month old up to 5 years old, the valuation shall be for a male 5 shekels of silver, and for a female the valuation shall be 3 shekels of silver. And if the person is 60 years old or over, dang it, you lose value. Dave, how old are you?
No, particularly fair.
That was a nosy question, wasn't it?
68.
You might just have lost value recently.
Just recently lost right.
I'll have you know that I'm a good 4 years away from losing my peak value. Okay. Then the valuation, oh my goodness, they got from 50 to 15. Good grief. Sorry, guys. This does not mean that you lose honor or respect. The scriptures are really big on the elderly receiving respect. But in terms of economy and commerce, well, it's a pretty ugly tale. On the other hand, if you wanted to have to pay for somebody, it's a lot cheaper if they were 60 than if they were 59. That's all I'm saying. So for a male, 15 shekels, and for a female, 10 shekels. And if someone is too poor to pay the valuation, then he shall be made to stand before the priest, and the priest shall value him, and the priest shall value him according to whatever the vower can afford. If the vow is an animal, that may be offered as an offering, and so forth and so on. You can, if it's a clean animal, then you can't buy it back. It belongs to God. If it's an unclean animal, then you can, there's a valuation is made. Later commentators, the Jewish writers or the Midrash or whatever they called it, the Targum back then, actually pointed this out. If Jephthah had had a clue what he was doing, he could have bought his daughter back for money, and he would not have had to do this hellish thing. Ignorance is deadly. But here's the stinger, folks. Who was the enemy here? The Ammonites, right? The Ammonites worshiped a god whose name was MLK. Not the one you're thinking of. But Molech or Milcom, it depends on the vowel pointing. Both forms appear. Molech or Milcom, this was a god specifically who specialized in child sacrifice. Which means that when Jephthah is getting ready to go to war against the people of Molech or Milcom, he makes a rash vow that whatever comes out of the door of his house upon his successful return will be offered to God as a way to honor God for God's help in the military victory. What ends up coming out of his house is a sacrifice worthy of Molech. Pretty nasty, huh? God took a dim view of this sort of thing. Let me look at a couple of scriptures here with you. In Deuteronomy chapter 12, what verse do we want? 31. Starting verse 29, when the Lord your God cuts off before you the nations whom you go in to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, take care that you be not ensnared to follow them after they have been destroyed before you, that you do not inquire about their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? God did not want any museums in Israel that devoted themselves to the culture of the Amorites, the religion of the Perizzites, that I also may do the same. You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, for every abominable thing that the Lord hates, they have done for their gods, for they even burned their sons and their daughters in the fire to their gods. One of the statues that archaeology has revealed to us, or that pictures, that ancient pictures that in archaeology have revealed to us, is that perhaps the Ammonites, but one culture would basically fashion or smelt a metal idol that was hollow, an idol that might have a human looking body with the head of a wolf or some weird, but the arms of the standing statue would be crooked like this, held out flat, with palms up. And they would build a fire of hot coals inside this metal idol so that the whole metal shell of the idol would be superheated. And then they would take an infant and they would lay it on the outstretched arms. As far as I can tell, in the entire Bible, especially in the Old Testament, the strongest language of condemnation that is found for any practice at all is this one. The idea of child sacrifice is so utterly abhorrent to God that the language he uses to express his hatred and his revulsion is the strongest language to be found in the entire text. It is of this that he will say in the prophets repeatedly later, that when they offer child sacrifice, he said, a thing that I did not contemplate, nor did it ever enter my mind. God says this thing is so unthinkable that it never occurred to me that anybody could be this evil. And then in Leviticus 18.
That in itself is probably one of the things in this depraved world that we live in now still stands.
Yes. And the Lord hates it just as much. In Leviticus 18 and verse 21, we read, you shall not give any of your children to offer them to Molech. This is the Ammonite god. And so profane the name of the Lord your God. I am Yahweh. You shall not do this. By the way, every other sin listed in this particular section is 2 chapters later visited with the death penalty. And if you were to do this, God would take you out. Now, there is another irony in our story here. We skipped this part because remember, Jephthah got long-winded. I cut him off. I took away his mic. when he was talking to the Ammonite king when he was sending his message. But there's something that we need to go back and note. Verse 23, so then the Lord, the God of Israel, dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel. And are you to take possession of them? He's saying the land you say was yours back then really belonged to the Amorites. So why should we give it to you? We took it from them and they're dead. They're not presenting a case. Verse 24, will you not possess what Chemosh, your God, gives you to possess? And all that Yahweh, our God, has dispossessed before us, we will possess. You keep what your God got for you. We'll keep what our God got for you. The only problem is he names the wrong God. Chemosh is not the Ammonite God. The rest of Scripture is perfectly clear, as is archaeology, that Chemosh was Moab's God, not Ammon's God. Moab was Ammon's brother. Wrong people. So Jephthah was very erudite and very eloquent, but he might have wanted 1 or 2 more years of law school before he presented his case. He was a little weak on the facts in places, just like he didn't know about buying back his daughter. He did good, but there are little flaws in the production. Now, one more thing we should notice, we're actually going to get through not only on time. I might let you out. No, I probably won't let you out early. That would be unworthy of a Shelburne. Sorry. Do you remember how I think we mentioned this at the end of Abimelech, I was in a hurry, so I can't recall whether I did. Abimelech was also the son of a concubine, a slave wife. And so his life was framed between 2 women, the slave woman who gave him birth and his brothers. He lived apart from his brothers because he was over in Shechem, where he wasn't with the folks at Oprah because he wasn't true family. And that's why he could become a king in Shechem, was because he was, his mama was from there. So his life was framed between 2 women, the concubine who gave him birth and the unnamed woman who dropped a millstone on his head. From womb to tomb, framed between these 2 women. The very next major judge, Jephthah, also has a life that is framed by 2 prominent women in the story. The woman who gave him birth, who was a whore, a prostitute, and the woman that he gave birth to, that he ends up sacrificing, who was a virgin. Yep, sad, sad story. Sad story. And yet God used Jephthah and his skill set, along with the Lord's power, to bring deliverance from an enemy. All right, some of you online on Zoom have been asking about homework, and I haven't given you any. Shame on me. This is optional. I mean, nobody has to. Hi, Lisa. I see you're on there too. I'm not able to hear for some reason. And I think what happened was when I told it to start the meeting, I got a glitch on my computer screen, and I think I didn't get to opt my sound into. I think that's what happened. So anyway, we'll fix that next time, hopefully. Okay, so here is some homework for those of you who choose to do it. We're dealing with lots of idolatry here, which upsets God. That starts the whole cycle through Judges, right? But we live in a secular culture, so we don't have idols, right? See, in a secular culture, you don't worship a named deity. You don't worship a God who has like sentience and a personality and a name. Is it possible to have idolatry in a secular culture? Is it possible to worship an idol? I'll give you one little hint. Really an answer, but anyway. Twice, at least, in the New Testament, when Paul is listing a catalog of sins that Christians are supposed to avoid, he says, one of the things you are not to be is greedy, because greed is idolatry. He says it at least twice in his writings. Greed is idolatry. And we've even given it a face. Pull out your cash and take a look. So the question that you can think of writing this in essay form, but if you want to do this in a secular culture that doesn't really worship gods by name, what is idolatry and what forms does it take? Who are the gods in our society if we have no gods? Who are the gods? Think in terms of the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me, which Jesus restated. The most important commandment is what? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. So what if, like the church in Ephesus, Revelation chapter 2, Jesus says, I have this against you. You left your first love. If you left your first love, that means that your first love is somewhere else, right? Not Jesus anymore. It's not the Lord your God. So an idol would be something that has captured our first love, right? In other words, what do you seek? What is the thing that you seek most, or that our society seeks most? You might want to write down some thoughts, and you can gear this toward your own life, or you can gear this toward our culture in general. By the way, we're in a time of tremendous cultural transition, and I would suggest to you that new gods are making their appearance as we speak. So, homework assignment, completely optional, and you could even turn it in or not based on however you feel. You don't have to, but you're welcome to. It's just to think through, and if you want to, write down some responses to that question. In our secular culture, where are the idols? What do they look like? What kind of allegiance are they demanding? Who do we worship, or what do we worship? And which gods are increasing their power, and which gods are perhaps bowing out? Just some thoughts. All right, it is 1 minute till quitting time, and we are done. The Lord bless and love your sons and daughters. Don't be a Jephthah. God bless.